بيان الاجتهاد وشروطه. Clarification of ijtihad and its conditions. الاجتهاد هو استخراج الأحكام التي لم يرد فيها نص صريح لا يحتمل إلا معنى واحدا من الكتاب والسنة. Ijtihad, which linguistically means effort, great effort, or most effort. It is deriving or extracting the rules which there did not come about them concerning them, there did not come concerning them an explicit text not bearing but one meaning from the book or the sunnah. There, that's emphatic talk here. He said, لم يرد فيها نص صريح, an explicit text. And then it's like he repeated himself when he said, لا يحتمل إلا معنى واحدا, not bearing but one meaning, because that's just another way to say explicit. من الكتاب والسنة, from the book and from the prophetic way. There didn't come anything explicit in those sources about the rule. فالمجتهد هو من له أهلية ذلك. So the mujtahid, he is the one who has the qualifications for that. بأن يكون عالما بالأحكام في كتاب الله, by being a scholar, knowledgeable about the rules that are in the book of Allah. وبناسخه ومنسوخه, and what's abrogating, it's abrogating, meaning the Quran's abrogating verses. It's abrogating and it's abrogated. I'll try not to go into too many details so we can cover as much as we can here, inshallah. وَعَامِّهِ وَخَاصِّهِ, and its general verses and its explicit verses. وَمُطْلَقِهِ وَمُقَيَّدِهِ, and its absolute verses, meaning unrestricted, not restricted, what doesn't have any particular limit or modifier or something that's absolute, like the freeing of a slave, for example. Does that have to be a Muslim slave or not? So just saying the freeing of a slave is absolute, the wording in itself. It's not restricted. وَمُقَيَّدِهِ, and its restricted verses or qualified verses. وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ, and other than that. وَيَسْتَدِلَّ عَلَى مَا احْتَمَلَ التَّأْوِيلِ, and he proves what is the meaning of what can have of what's not explicit. He proves the meaning of what's not explicit by the sunnah or by the consensus. فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ, if there was nothing of that sort, فَبِالْقِيَاسِ عَلَى مَا فِي الْكِتَابِ, then he makes legal comparison of what's in the book. Yani, there's something in the book, and he compares the issue at hand to what's in the book. فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ, and if there was nothing of the sort, فَبِالْقِيَاسِ عَلَى مَا فِي السُّنَّةِ, then he makes a legal comparison from what's in the prophetic way. فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ, and if there was nothing of the sort, yani he didn't find that. فَبِالْقِيَاسِ عَلَى مَا اتَّفَقَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَفُ وَإِجْمَاعِ النَّاسِ, then he makes legal comparison from the consensus. وَلَمْ يُعْرَفْ لَهُ مُخَالِفٌ, amongst the cases that it's not known that anyone disagreed about them. وَلَا يَجُوزُ الْقَوْلُ فِي شَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْأَوْجُهِ, and there is no way to talk about the knowledge but by these avenues. Yani, he's talking about, he says, yani, here, to talk about any of the knowledge, we're talking about ijtihad. This is Ash-Shafi'i's quote, by the way, here. Shaykh here, he started by giving the talk of Ash-Shafi'i himself. He just didn't cite it. وَلَا يَكُونُ صَالِحًا لِأَنْ يَقِيسَ حَتَّى يَكُونَ عَالِمًا بِمَا مَضَى قَبْلَهُ مِنَ السُّنَنِ, and one would not be suitable for legal comparison until he is knowledgeable of what has come before him of the prophetic ways. وَأَقْوَالِ السَّلَفِ, and the sayings of the noble predecessors, the Salaf. وَإِجْمَاعِ النَّاسِ, and the consensus of the people, meaning the Mujtahids. وَاخْتِلَافِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, and the difference of the scholars. He needs to know that too. Some things are a matter of difference, and an ignorant person would think it's a matter of consensus. وَلِسَانِ الْعَرَبِ, and the tongue of the Arabs. وَيَكُونَ صَحِيحَ الْعَقْلِ, and that he would be of sound mind. And really, this means he would be a genius. لِيُفَرِّقَ بَيْنَ الْمُشْتَبِهَاتِ, so that he could differentiate between the obscure matters, or so that he could differentiate between the fine differences between things. وَلَا يَعْجَلْ, and he must not rush. وَيَسْمَعَ مِمَّنْ خَالَفَهُ, and he listens to who opposes him. He listens to who disagrees with him. Very important there. That's a good advice for life. If you only listen to people who agree with you, then you'll find yourself in an echo chamber. لِيَتَنَبَّهَ بِذَلِكَ عَلَى غَفْلَةٍ إِنْ كَانَتْ, so that he can be alerted to anything he missed, so that he can be alerted to any heedlessness, had there been any. وَأَنْ يَبْلُغَ غَايَةَ جُهْدِهِ, and he must exert his greatest effort. وَيُنْصِفَ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ, and he has to be objective, that he has to be fair. حَتَّى يَعْرِفَ مِنْ أَيْنَ قَالَ مَا قَالَ, so that he knows from where is he saying what he says. وَتُشْتَرَطُ الْعَدَالَةِ, and trustworthiness is a condition. But here, this is a condition that some people misunderstood. Not a condition for being a mujtahid. It's a condition for someone to take his ijtihad. It's possible that a mujtahid would be a major sinner, though that's rare. Usually if someone reaches that level, he will be pious. But it's not impossible that someone would reach that level and be a major sinner. And it's said that Iblis is at that level. Satan himself. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ تَعَالَى. وَهِيَ السَّلَامَةُ مِنَ الْكَبَائِرِ, which is being safe from, being clear of major sins. وَمِنَ الْمُدَاوَمَةِ عَلَى الصَّغَائِرِ, and from persisting on small sins. وَهِيَ أَن تَغْلِبَ عَلَى حَسَنَاتِهِ مِنْ حَيْثُ الْعَدَدِ, and the persistence on small sins is verified by those small sins overcoming, outnumbering his good deeds. وَيُشْتَرَطُ فَوْقَ ذَلِكَ شَرْطٌ, and above all of that, there's a condition, هُوَ رُكْنٌ عَظِيمٌ فِي الْاجْتِهَادِ, which is a major condition, which is a major condition for ijtihad. وَهُوَ فِقْهُ النَّفْسِ, which is genius. أي قوة الفهم والإدراك, meaning powerful understanding and realization. اختلاف المجتهدين, the difference of the mujtahids. الاختلاف على وجهين, the difference amongst the scholars, the mujtahids, is in two, or difference in opinion is in two ways, has two cases. الأول الاختلاف في المنصوص عليه, the first is a difference about something explicitly documented. ولا يحل الاختلاف فيه, and it's not permissible to have a difference in opinion about that. كالصلوات المفروضات, like the obligatory prayers. وتحريم الزنا واللواط, and the prohibition of fornication and sodomy. وغير ذلك, and other than that. فمن علم بالنص ثم خالف في ذلك, so anyone who knows about that explicit documentation and then goes against it, فَقَدْ كَذَّبَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى وَرَسُولَهُ فِي خَبَرِهِمَا, then he has belied or contradicted Allah, exalted is He, and His Messenger in their news. فَيُحْكَمُ بِكُفْرِهِ, so then the judgment of his blasphemy would be confirmed. وَمَنْ خَالَفَ وَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ بِالنَّصِّ, and whoever opposed and didn't know about the explicit documentation, وَلَمْ يُنْكِرْ أَمْرًا مَعْلُومًا مِنَ الدِّينِ بِالضَّرُورَةِ, and he did not deny a matter that is known in the religion by necessity, something known by the scholars and the laymen, the knowledgeable and the ignorant. كَفَرُضِيَّةِ الصَّلَوَاتِ الْخَمْسِ, like the obligation of the 5 . وَتَحْرِيمِ الزِّنَا وَاللِّوَاطِ, And the prohibition of fornication and sodomy, وحل البيع, and the lawfulness of selling, فلا يكفر, then in this case, that opposer does not blaspheme. والثاني الاختلاف في غير المنصوص عليه والمجمع عليه. The second case is a difference in opinion in something not explicitly documented and not a case of consensus. ويسوغ فيه الاجتهاد, and it is something in which ijtihad is permissible, applicable. كاختلاف بعض الصحابة في بعض المسائل, like the difference between like the difference of some of the companions concerning some cases of inheritance, for example, or other cases. فقد اختلف اجتهاد أبي بكر عن اجتهاد علي وزيد بن ثابت في مسألة توريث الإخوة مع الجد. For indeed there has been a difference in the ijtihad of Abu Bakr between the ijtihad of Abu Bakr and that of Ali and Zayd ibn Thabit in the case of brothers inheriting with a grandfather. Brothers inheriting with a grandfather. That means the dead has left behind him brothers and a grandfather. وكذلك اختلاف الشافعي وأبي حنيفة في مسألة نقض مس المرأة الأجنبية بلا حائل الوضوء. And likewise, the difference between Ash-Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa in the case of wudu being broken by touching a marriageable woman without a barrier, yani touching her skin. Because a Shafi'i has no detail there, it breaks the wudu. With desire or without desire, if you're married or you're not married, yani if that's your wife or it's not your wife, or you meant to or you didn't mean to. So for a Shafi'i, there's no detail there, but other scholars have details there. Al-Muqallid, the imitator, or the follower, or the mimicker, or the one who has fellowship. وَأَمَّا الْمُقَلِّدْ, as for the mimicker, the imitator, فَهُوَ الَّذِي لَمْ يَصِلْ إِلَى تِلْكَ الْمَرْتَبَةِ, he is the one who did not reach that level. بل يعمل بما قال المجتهدون, rather he works according to what the mujtahids have said. كالشافعي ومالك وأحمد وأبي حنيفة وغيرهم, the mujtahids like Ash-Shafi'i, Malik, Ahmad, Abu Hanifa, and others. Here, I'll remind you of what's correct. What's correct is that the layman does not have a madhab. Although the people famously, commonly, laymen like ourselves say, oh, I'm a Shafi'i, I'm a Maliki, etc. But what's really correct in this realm is that the layman does not have a madhab. he doesn't have a madhab. When you have a madhab, you have a madhab when you know the proofs. So some people, they just know the rules. Some people know incomplete rules, like ourselves. Just learners, we haven't encompassed the madhab yet. Some have encompassed that madhab in rules. They know the madhab, but they still don't have a hand in the proofs. Those are laymen too who don't have a madhab. Then some of them, they reach the level where they can tell the difference between the strong saying and the weak saying in the madhab. Those are the ones who have a madhab. He says, so when people say, what madhab are you? It is better to answer, I do not have a madhab. Well, that's correct. That's correct. If someone was a layman and he said, my madhab is such and such, technically that's not correct. He doesn't have a madhab. But some people say it and they mean, this is the madhab I follow. I didn't learn that that's haram. If he says, I'm a Shafi'i, because that's what he learns and practices. If you want to avoid a wrong answer and at the same time not say you don't have a madhab, you can say, if someone said, what madhab are you? You can say, the madhab I practice is such and such. The madhab I implement is the madhab of Ash-Shafi'i. You said the Naqala knows the difference between weak and strong sayings? No, they don't. The Naqala, the transmitters, the conveyors, traditionally they are not scholars actually. It's later terminology that deems them scholars. Otherwise, they are students. They are advanced students, maybe, if you want. Such that they became called scholars eventually as time passed. The Naqala are not the ones who know the weak sayings from the strong sayings. The preponderators are. That's their job. They say this is weak, this is the weak saying, this is the strong saying in the madhab. So that's what my statement meant. Yani, the way I said it does not at all mean that the Naqala have a madhab. والدليل على أن المسلمين على هاتين المرتبتين قوله. And the evidence that the Muslims are of these two levels is the Prophet's saying, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, نَضَّرَ اللَّهُ امْرَأً سَمِعَ مَقَالَتِي. May Allah beautify a person who heard my saying, فَوَعَاهَا, and he memorized it. فَرُبَّ حَامِلٍ, فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ لَا فِقْهَ لَهُ. For many a carrier of fiqh there is, but he has no fiqh. Many a carrier of fiqh who has no fiqh there is. Many carry fiqh because they have the hadiths. La fiqh lah, but he doesn't himself have the knowledge of fiqh. He's not a mujtahid. وَالشَّاهِدُ فِي الْحَدِيثِ قَوْلُهُ. The evidence in the hadith, the evidence in the hadith is his saying, فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ لَا فِقْهَ لَهُ. Many a carrier of fiqh there is who has no fiqh. That's the evidence in the hadith. وَفِي رِوَايَةٍ, and in another rendition, فَرُبَّ مُبَلَّغٍ أَوْعَى مِنْ سَامِعٍ. He said, for many a receiver there is who has more comprehension than who heard firsthand. Many a receiver there is with more comprehension than who heard firsthand. That the third party. You said, I was under the impression that the murajjih preponderate between weak and strong sayings, and the naqala know the difference so that they only convey the strong sayings in general and weak sayings when needed. The naqala, they don't have any opinion. The naqala has no opinion. Zero. Their only job is to convey. That's it. The murajjih, the preponderator, he preponderates between the weak and strong sayings because he knows the weak from the strong. That's what my statement meant. He knows the weak from the strong sayings. That means he's the one who makes it weak or strong. Because he knows that. In other words, the preponderator, he's a mujtahid. A type of mujtahid, that is. So he has a madhab. But the naqala, all they can do is say what someone else said, and that's it. قال فإنه يفهمنا أن من الناس من حظه الرواية فقط. This hadith makes us understand that amongst the people is who his share is narrating only. وليس عنده مقدرة على فهم ما يتضمنه الحديث من المعاني. And he does not have the capacity to understand what this hadith includes of meanings. One hadith, even if it's short, sometimes they pull out so many judgments from one hadith due to their sharpness. وفي لفظ لهذا الحديث, and according to another rendition, a third rendition of this hadith, فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَفْقَهُ مِنْهُ. For many a carrier of fiqh to has more. For many a carrier of fiqh to whom has fiqh than him, or two, who has more fiqh than him. For many, a carrier of fiqh, two, who has more fiqh than him, there is. وهذا المجتهد هو مورد قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And this mujtahid, he is the subject of the Prophet's saying صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا حكم الحاكم فاجتهد ثم أصاب فله أجران. When a judge judges, so he makes ijtihad, and then he's correct, then he has two rewards. وَإِذَا حَكَمَ فَاجْتَهَدَ ثُمَّ أَخْطَأَ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ. And if he judges, so he makes ijtihad, and then he is mistaken, then he has a reward. وإنما خص رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في هذا الحديث الحاكم بالذكر. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam only specified in this hadith mentioning the judge or the ruler, the hakim, لأنه أحوج إلى الاجتهاد من غيره, because he is more in need of ijtihad than someone else. فقد مضى مجتهدون في السلف حاكمون كالخلفاء الستة. There have passed mujtahids in the Salaf who were rulers, like the six caliphs, Abi Bakr wa Umar wa Uthman wa Ali wa Al-Hasan ibn Ali wa Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Like Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali and Al-Hasan, the son of Ali, and Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who came afterwards by some time. He was at the year 100, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. وَكَبْنِ سُرَيْجٍ الْقَاضِي, and like Judge Surayj. وَمَضَى مُجْتَهِدُونَ غَيْرُ حَاكِمِينَ, and there have also passed mujtahids who are not rulers. كالشافعي ومالك وأحمد بن حنبل وأبي حنيفة وغيرهم. Like Ash-Shafi'i, Malik, Ahmad, Abu Hanifa, and others. Ibn Surayj, I said Surayj without Ibn. Kabni Surayj al-Qadi, like Judge Ibn Surayj. Thank you. وَالْمُرَادُ بِالْحَاكِمِ هُنَا الْمُجْتَهِدِ, and the intent, or what's meant by the hakim in this hadith here is the mujtahid. قال النووي في شرح مسلم, said An-Nawawi in the explanation of Muslim's authentic book, ما نصه, quote, قال العلماء, the scholars said, أجمع المسلمون على أن هذا الحديث في حاكم عالم أهل للحكم. The Muslims have a consensus that this hadith is concerning a ruler who is a scholar and qualified for giving judgment, giving verdict. فَإِنْ أَصَابَ فَلَهُ أَجْران. If he's correct, he has two rewards. أَجْرٌ بِاجْتِهَادِهِ وَأَجْرٌ بِإِصَابَتِهِ. A reward for his effort and a reward for his being correct. وَإِنْ أَخْطَأَ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ بِاجْتِهَادِهِ. And if he's mistaken, then he has a reward for his effort. وفي الحديث محذوف تقديره إذا أراد الحاكم فاجتهد. And in the hadith there's something omitted, and the implication is when the ruler wants to rule, and so he makes ijtihad. قالوا, they said, those scholars, فَأَمَّا مَنْ لَيْسَ بِأَهْلٍ لِلْحُكْمِ. As for who is not qualified to give verdict, فَلَا يَحِلُّ لَهُ الْحُكْمِ. Then not lawful for him is giving verdict. فَإِنْ حَكَمَ فَلَا أَجْرَ لَهُ. So if he gives a verdict, then there is no reward for him. بَلْ هُوَ آثِمٌ. Rather, he is sinful. وَلَا يُنَفَّذْ حُكْمُهُ. Or يُنَفَّذُ. Let's read it. يُنَفَّذُ. وَلَا يُنَفَّذُ حُكْمُهُ. And his verdict is not implemented. سَوَاءٌ وَافَقَ الْحَقَّ أَمْ لَا. Whether it agrees with the truth or not. لِأَنَّ إِصَابَتَهُ اتِّفَاقِيَّةٌ. Because his being correct is a mere coincidence. لَيْسَ صَادِرَةً عَنْ أَصْلٍ شَرْعِيٍّ. It is not issued forth from a legal basis. فَهُوَ عَاصٍ فِي جَمِيعِ أَحْكَامِهِ. So such a one would be disobedient in all of his verdicts. سَوَاءٌ وَافَقَ الصَّوَابَ أَمْ لَا. Whether he agreed with the truth or not. Whether he actually arrived at what's correct or not. وَهِيَ مَرْدُودَةٌ كُلُّهَا. And they are rejected, all of them. All of his verdicts. وَلَا يُعْذَرُ فِي شَيْءٍ مِّن ذَلِكَ. And he is not pardoned for any of that. Like whom? Like Ibn Taymiyyah, who says many weird things. And then his Wahhabi followers say, if the scholar makes ijtihad and he's wrong, he still gets a reward. Lay off of him. He's not even a Mujtahid in the first place. He's not even a Muslim. وَلَا يُعْذَرُ فِي شَيْءٍ مِّن ذَلِكَ. And he's not excused for any of that. انتهى. End quote. وقال الحافظ ابن حجر في الفتح. Said Hafiz ibn Hajar in Al-Fath. ما نصه, quote, هكذا وقع في الحديث بدأ بالحكم قبل الاجتهاد والأمر بالعكس فإن الاجتهاد يتقدم الحكم إذ لا يجوز الحكم قبل الاجتهاد اتفاقا. He said, that's what came in the hadith. one started giving verdict before ijtihad, and the matter is reverse of that, is the opposite of that. For indeed, having ijtihad should come before giving verdict, since it's not permissible to give verdict before ijtihad by agreement. Intaha, end quote. وقد عد علماء الحديث الذين ألفوا في كتب مصطلح الحديث المفتين في الصحابة أقل من 10. And the scholars of hadith who authored books of hadith terminology have counted the muftis, that means mujtahids, amongst the companions being less than 10. So we're talking out of over 100,000 people. Some scholars said not more than 10 of them became mujtahids. And this saying is not the reliable saying, but that's what some of them said. The reliable saying is more like 200 of them became mujtahids. فَإِذَا كَانَ الْأَمْرُ فِي الصَّحَابَةِ هَكَذَا. So if the matter is like that concerning the companions, فَمِنْ أَيْنَ يَصِحُّ لِكُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ يَسْتَطِيعُ أَنْ يَقْرَأَ الْقُرْآنَ وَيُطَالِعَ فِي بَعْضِ الْكُتُبِ أَنْ يَقُولُ. Then where did it become valid for every Muslim who's able to read the Quran and to read in some books to say, أُولَٰئِكَ رِجَالٌ وَنَحْنُ رِجَالٌ. Those, Ash-Shafi'i and his peers, they are men and we are men. فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْنَا أَن نُقَلِّدَهُمْ. So we don't have to imitate them. Where'd they get that from? وَقَدْ ثَبَتَ أَنَّ أَكْثَرَ السَّلَفِ كَانُوا غَيْرَ مُجْتَهِدِينَ. And it is confirmed that most of the Salaf were not mujtahids. بَلْ كَانُوا مُقَلِّدِينَ لِلْمُجْتَهِدِينَ مِنْهُمْ. Rather, they were imitators of the mujtahids among them. Even the hadith scholars, it's a strong proof for you. That one bothers any Wahhabi who hates the idea of having to follow a madhab or mujtahid. And he wants to only follow the hadiths. He says, we have Quran and hadith, we don't need those imams. When you tell him, the hadith imams were following the imams, the hadith scholars were following the schools, then he becomes weak and confused and defensive. And then he'll start arguing with you sometimes with no knowledge even. He had no idea. He didn't even think that far. So then when you tell him Muslim followed a Shafi'i, he doesn't know what to do. He'll it's a good chance he'll deny it. Or you tell him, well, bring your proof. He doesn't care really, though, even what's your proof. He doesn't care. He just doesn't want to shut up. ففي صحيح البخاري أن رجلا كان أجيرا لرجل. In the authentic book of Al-Bukhari, it is reported that one man was the employee of another man. فزنى بامرأته. And then he fornicated with his employer's wife, or he had an affair with her. فسأل أبوه. And so this man's father asked on his behalf, on behalf of his son who had the affair. فقيل له. So it was said to the father, إن على ابنك 100 شاة وأمة. It was said to him, incumbent on your son is 100 sheep and a slave woman. So he paid it. The father paid that. ثُمَّ سَأَلَ أَهْلَ الْعِلْمِ, and then he asked the people of knowledge. فَقَالُوا لَهُ, so they said to him, إِنَّمَا عَلَى ابْنِكَ جِلْدُ مِئَةٍ وَتَغْرِيبُ عَامٍ. They said, what is on your son is to be whipped 100 lashes and banished for a year. فَجَاءَ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ, so he went to the messenger, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, مَعَ زَوْجِ الْمَرْأَةِ, with the husband of the woman. فَقَالَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, and so he said, O messenger of Allah, إِنَّ ابْنِي هَذَا كَانَ عَسِيفًا أي أجيرا على هذا. Indeed, this son of mine was an employee of this man. وَزَنَا بِامْرَأَتِهِ, and he fornicated with his wife. فَقَالَ لِي نَاسٍ, so some people said to me, عَلَى ابْنِكَ الرَّجْمُ, your son is to be stoned. فَفَدَيْتُ ابْنِي مِنْهُ بِمِئَةٍ مِنَ الْغَنَمِ وَوَلِيدَةٍ, so I paid a ransom for my son. I paid for him 100 sheep and a slave woman. ثُمَّ سَأَلْتُ أَهْلَ الْعِلْمِ, then I asked the people of knowledge. فَقَالُوا, and so they said, إِنَّمَا عَلَى ابْنِكَ جِلْدُ مِئَةٍ وَتَغْرِيبُ عَامٍ. Merely what is incumbent on your son is 100 lashes and banishment for a year, or a year of exile. فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, and so the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, لَأَقْضِيَنَّ بَيْنَكُمَا بِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ, I swear I shall surely judge between you by the book of Allah. أَمَّا الْوَلِيدَةُ وَالْغَنَمُ, as for the slave woman and the flock, فَرَدٌّ عَلَيْهِ, they are to be reimbursed. وَعَلَى ابْنِكَ جِلْدُ مِئَةٍ وَتَغْرِيبُ عَامٍ, and incumbent on your son is 100 lashes and a year of exile. فَهَذَا الرَّجُلُ مَعَ كَوْنِهِ مِنَ الصَّحَابَةِ, so what's the point here? Why the Shaykh produced this? This man, despite being amongst the companions, سَأَلَ أُنَاسًا مِنَ الصَّحَابَةِ, he asked some companions, فَأَخْطَأُوا الصَّوَابِ, and they were incorrect. ثُمَّ أَفْتَاهُ الرَّسُولُ بِمَا يُوَافِقُ مَا قَالَهُ أُولَئِكَ الْعُلَمَاءُ مِنَ الصَّحَابَةِ, then the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave him a verdict that agreed with what those scholars of the companions said. فإذا كان الرسول أفهمنا أن بعض من كانوا يسمعون منه الحديث ليس لهم فقه. So, if the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam made us understand that some of those who heard directly from him hadiths do not have fiqh, أي مقدرة على استخراج الأحكام من حديثه, meaning they don't have the capacity to extract the rules from his hadith. وإنما حظهم أن يرووا عنه ما سمعوا, and merely their share is to report from him what they heard. مع كونهم يفهمون اللغة العربية الفصحى, despite that they understand the classical Arabic language. فما بال هؤلاء الغوغاء فما بال هؤلاء الغوغاء. Then what's the case of those ruffians الذين يتجرؤون على قول أولئك رجال ونحن رجال, those who dare to say about the mujtahids, they are men and we are men. ويعنون بقولهم أولئك رجال, and what they mean by saying they are men, whom they mean is المجتهدين كالأئمة الأربعة, the mujtahids, like the four imams. How arrogant. So let's see here. So our time is up here. I was hoping I could get down to here. Changing madhabs, going between madhabs and seeking the easier judgment. So let's try that next time then. Insha'Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam. Let's stop there. Do you have any questions?